Hello everyone and welcome to the SYSTRAcast podcast. Today we're filming the mini-series called The Next Gen Meets, where today the Next Gen meets the lovely Sophie Bancroft. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Thank you for coming today. We'd love you to introduce yourself today to the SYSTRA team, so please go ahead and talk us through how you got here and to your career progression so far.
Brilliant, thank you. Hi, so it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for asking me. Sophie Bancroft, and I'm currently working at Network Rail on secondment to some of the GBR preparation work, kind of looking at what it feels like to be an employee there. But substantively, I've spent most of my career in operations, starting off at Transport for London on their grad scheme and sort of worked my way through lots of different jobs.
Brilliant. So what initially attracted you to the world of transport? Was there anything that sparked that interest?
Yeah, so I think quite a lot of people started in the rail industry by saying, oh, I only meant to start for 3 months, or I didn't really know what I was doing. But I've always loved trains. So my dad was a bit of a steam train fan, and I kind of spent a lot of my childhood looking at trains and like going to Slough Station, looking at steam trains, which is more fun than it sounds. And so I kind of always liked the industry. But actually it was just looking at what graduate schemes there were available. I knew I wanted to work in London. I knew I wanted to work for a big company. Wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, so I wanted to look for one that gave me the most choice, really. And Transport for London sort of ticked all those boxes. And so I sort of ended up on their grad scheme without really wanting to go massively into the transport industry. But as part of my grad scheme, we had to work in stations. And I did a 3-month secondment as a supervisor at Oxford Circus Station. And that's where I was like, this is what I love doing. Like operations, talking to people, the fast pace. And I just fell in love with it from then.
Brilliant. That's so interesting to hear that you started on a grad scheme and then you've kind of evolved through transitioning different positions and roles. So what is your current position? Do you want to delve into that a little bit deeper? And then we can touch into how you got there from your grad job.
Yeah. So I joined Network Rail as operations director for Western Route. So it's the accountability for all the trains running out of Paddington down to Bristol and then down into Cornwall. So it's the control room and the signallers working with our train operating colleagues and so the track and infrastructure team sort of make sure the railway runs smoothly, which is a big job, but it's interesting. But I'm currently on secondment to Great British Railways within Network Rail. So that is, so I'm leading the development of the employee value proposition. So it's like, what will GBR look and feel like to colleagues and employees, which is totally different to anything I've ever done. But the sort of idea is that as it will kind of come out along my career, it's I've sort of put myself into jobs that are really different to kind of like my core operational focus. And I've been brought in specifically because I'm not an HR person. I'm not sort of like a culture specialist. It's just what I've learned from my years in the industry.
Yeah, brilliant. So would you say that you're bringing a new perspective and insight into those conversations that potentially they didn't have so much of before?
Definitely. So I work with some amazing people and they're all very, very clever, but they don't know the railway as much. Yeah. And so I'm kind of bringing in the perspective of like, oh, that's great on paper, but actually the signal operator will work like this, or a train operator will be like that, or this is what it actually feels like to stand up for 8 hours with loads of people talking at you. And it's all those sorts of things that when you're talking about what's important to someone, I'm trying to bring the voice of the sort of the frontline person into those conversations. So yeah, very much bringing the kind of the real perspective as I like to kind of think about it.
Yeah, brilliant. That's really interesting to talk about. And also I'd love to talk about how you've transitioned into a role that probably was quite different to being an operations director.
Yeah, so I've done this quite a few times throughout my career. So I got diagnosed with ADHD in 2022, so late diagnosis. And I think that is actually possibly is one of the sort of biggest strengths I have in doing lots of different career roles. So I quite like change. I quite like putting myself in difficult situations and different ones and sort of broadening my horizons. And actually, I would never have got the operations director job had I not done that at Transport for London.
Yeah.
So when I was at TfL, I came back from my second maternity leave. I've got 2 lovely little children, and I was head of the Metropolitan Line train operation, so managing all the train operators on the Met Line. And I had done that for a few years. I'd gone on my second maternity leave. I came back and I thought, I need to do something different. Like I understand this job. For me, like being comfortable is a sign to move on. Like I don't like it. And it just makes me feel a bit like, oh, what's over there? It's not grass is greener. It's just, I've learned this. What else can I go and learn? How can I sort of develop myself to not be better, but to do my job better, I suppose.
Yeah, expand into new areas. Yeah.
And sort of bring different perspectives into kind of my mind, really. So actually, I applied for a job. It was head of bus operations at TfL. And my son was 15, 16 months old. My daughter was 4 something. And my little boy got a fever, and he's totally fine, but it was just like a normal childhood bug. And I had to go home and pick him up from nursery at like 12 o'clock. And I was like, oh God, I can't apply for a new job in an area that I don't know. And I had like a proper wobble. And I was like, no, I can't do it. I cannot do this to my children. I can't do this myself. My husband is very supportive, but at that time was a contractor. So if he didn't go to work, he didn't get paid. So it was me leaving at 12 o'clock, which is fine. But I was like, I can do that in an environment where I've built up the trust of my team. They know I'm not like taking the mick. And so I withdrew from the job application because I was like, no, this isn't the time. I just need to be a mum. That's what I should be doing. And the amazing Claire Mann, who's now Chief Operating Officer at TfL, didn't know me, but she was the recruiter. She was director of buses at the time. And she contacted me through the recruiter saying, oh, I'd just really like to have a cup of coffee just talk about why you applied and withdrew. I was like, okay. I was a bit nervous. So I went and met her, and she was so lovely. And I decided to be really honest because I was going to do like a whole it just wasn't the right fit or something. I was like, no, do you know what? I told her the truth, and I was like, look, my son was ill. I had a wobble. I was like, I just need to look after him. And she's looked at me and she's like, that was silly, wasn't it? And I was like, oh. And we had a really good conversation. She was kind of saying about how the best leaders are really authentic and everyone has a home life. And whether it's a son who's ill or a parent who's ill or just you're ill yourself, like no one is available 24/7. She's like, I've had to leave at short notice to go and do something and no one thinks any less of me. And she was like, so don't let that stop you from progressing. And it was such a powerful conversation, and I will always be indebted to her for sort of seeking me out and doing that, because she could easily have not. Like I pulled out before the advert closed, so she didn't need to do it at all. So that then sparked me to apply for another job, which was head of surface business strategy. So moving from a very operational underground job to what felt like a totally different company, but it was Transport for London Surface. And I got it. So I did 18 months as head of strategy for surface transport. And that was possibly the most frightening job move I've done. I walked into that job and I knew nothing. I was sort of asked a question saying, oh, can you build a dashboard for this? And I was like, what? It's like, what's a dashboard? Like, what does a dashboard mean to you? Like, I know what it means to me.
Yeah.
And I was sort of like I was like asking grads on the team to be like, what does this mean? Like, what are we doing here? But actually, again, it was so good for me because I've learned so much. And that job taught me about sort of business planning, which I hadn't had any real exposure to before. It taught me how TfL is funded, like more than just sort of what you'd read in the paper. It's how stuff gets done, how decisions get made. And it was also February 2020, so it literally started and then COVID hit. So it was working with all the sort of surface directors and MD about what on earth we were going to do. And it was such an interesting job. And I knew it wasn't a job that I wanted to do forever. Like I really missed the railway. I missed operating. But without that strategy job, I never would have got ops director at Network Rail.
Yeah.
So I think at the time, I don't always know what it's going to lead to. But every move I've made, something has come out of it afterwards I didn't even see when I went into it.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like you've really kind of grown into each role that you've transitioned into.
Yeah.
And one thing that you touched on there that I want to touch on a bit more is how having that kind of informal mentorship and having those people in senior positions, particularly women, who are there to kind of, you've got visibility of them there, and like how important that is to kind of see yourself progressing. And I want you to kind of delve into that kind of informal mentorship. Have you kind of had any other experiences similar to that? Yeah, definitely. And I think it's the word is really important, is informal. I find formal mentoring schemes really awkward. Right.
Personally, it just doesn't, I find it really hard to like have a conversation with someone who I'm like, oh, you picked me by email, hello. But it's the informal ones that are so important. So on the graduate scheme, I met a lady at TfL called Trish Ashton, who's a really good friend now. And she was so supportive to me in the graduate scheme. And she sort of was always there as someone to bounce ideas off, go for coffee and just talk through different situations with. And I don't even think at the time I realised that it was informal mentoring. It was just, there were so few women in management positions. I was like, oh, hi, can I go and get you coffee? And I literally just emailed everyone. I said, can I go for coffee with you? Like, can you have a coffee? And it was like no shame. Like whoever I would ask. And they always said yes. No one's ever said no.
Yeah.
I think that's something I've always learned is that no one says no. And it might not be today, it might not be next week, but it might be a few months down the line. But someone's always said yes. And I think for me, what's really interesting is that the mentors, sort of those unofficial mentors I've had, they sort of come in and out with a frequency of which I talk to them, but they've always stayed. And actually what's been interesting is leaving TfL is how many people I've stayed in contact with. And that's been really lovely, whether it's sort of the odd text message here or there or going out for drinks with people. And I think it's really lovely to have found women in the industry who can kind of, I can talk to and ask for support from. And yeah, it's been really nice. I think what I've struggled with sometimes is that not all women are supportive. And some women I find are particularly hard on other women, and some women feel like because they had a really hard time to get where they were going, that everyone else has to have a really hard time. And that I struggle with that, and I'm like, I can't deal with that. So I note that and I move on, and I'm like, I wish you well, but I'm going to go and seek someone else to talk to.
Yeah, it's all about growing your network as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're all here to kind of support each other and encourage them into new roles. And I think particularly as a grad who's recently started in the industry, like I'm really finding value in reaching out to people and gaining those connections, and maybe not even like a role I want to go into, or just kind of they're in adjacent teams or something, and I'm like, I can learn something from you. And I don't know what it is, but I know that you're good at what you do. Yeah. And I want to learn.
I think you can find that spark from someone. Yeah. And I think it's a connection you have with someone like personally. But I think it's, I love that. I think for me, when I was talking to people on the grad scheme, it's like they'd ask for advice and I'd say, go and do a placement in somewhere you never want to work. Because the best thing about a graduate or apprentice scheme is that you have those opportunities to do sort of 3 months secondments. And I was like, you might hate the job, but that's brilliant because you found an area that you don't want to go into, but you've met the people there who help.
Yeah.
Who can help you. And I think that the more silo thinking you are, sort of the worse you'll do at your job, if that makes sense. That sounds quite negative, but I think it's the more different thoughts you can have and the different people you can bring into different experiences.
You start to almost like adapt their opinions into how you would go about your job as well, because you know the other side to it all.
Yeah.
Like it improves like the wider business thinking, doesn't it?
So, absolutely. So you think there's the Sheryl Sandberg book, Lean In? There's a really good bit in there when she was saying she was working at Facebook and she was the first pregnant woman to be at Facebook or something in senior management. And there was no parking spaces for pregnant people, so she was having to park her car like really far back, and she was 8 months pregnant walking in. So this is ridiculous. And so now that then they had pregnant parking spots right at the front. She's like, but no one had thought of that because no one had been pregnant while working there. And so we think it's the more views you can get in, like obviously there's a limit to that, but the more experiences and sort of diversity of thought backgrounds you can bring in, the better the outcome will be. And I just think that's so important.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd like to touch on as well, you've mentioned you had 2 lovely children.
Yeah.
And so how do you feel that being a mother has kind of shaped your career progression? Is there any kind of things that you, looking back, you kind of wish you knew? Any advice that you could give to people maybe navigating a similar situation?
Yeah, I think, so I talk about them a lot because I quite like them. I do love my kids. And I also, I didn't see enough of it when I was younger, of people talking about their children. And like, it's not admitting they had families, but it was very much, no one really spoke about their kids. And I was like, I need to see people having children and working and being in senior jobs. And I just didn't see it. And actually at TfL at the time, in London Underground particularly, I didn't know any senior manager women with children. And I was like, why is that? Is that because it's impossible? And so I always make a point of talking about them because I want people to know that it is possible. I think I also had IVF for my children. So there was a whole process of going to appointments, coming back. And I was really fortunate in that I was in a job that I wasn't in shift work. So I could go to appointments in the morning and then go to work. I didn't really have to talk about it. But I felt really lucky at Transport for London. My boss, a guy called Nick Dent, was so supportive. And I came back from my first maternity leave and I knew that I wanted to work. I wanted to stay at home a day a week with my daughter. So I wanted to work 4 days, but have a day at home. But I didn't want to take a pay cut for that because I was in operations and I answer my phone 24/7, basically. I'm working the weekends, nights, like whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I feel like I don't really want to take a pay cut of having a Friday off because I will always answer my phone if there's something going on, and like I will do it. So I went in and I just said, Nick, I explained the situation. I said, can I work my 5th day in my own time? So it wasn't sort of 5 days in 4, because I also couldn't do long days because I had to pick her up. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And it was like I was gearing up for a really awkward, difficult conversation. And he was like, no, whatever you need for you to excel, we can do. And I remember just thinking, wow, that's amazing. And so I did. And so I worked, I call it 4 days and 7. And it was brilliant. And it was until my son went to school. And so I think whenever I talk to people about it, like, how did you get that? And I was like, I just asked. And I think sometimes parents are sometimes a bit frightened to ask because they're worried about the impact it will have on them or how they'll be perceived or not working hard enough. And I think that I was very lucky to work in a company that was quite progressive and forward thinking, and working for a boss who also had 3 children and liked spending time with them. So he knew what it was like. I can also imagine that people didn't have such easy experiences, but I would always say ask.
Yeah.
I have a really lovely supportive husband. So in lockdown, he was a consultant contractor, and we made the decision for him to stop working, and I kept working. My son was 18 months at the time. So we couldn't, and we live in a flat in London, like we couldn't both work and try and pretend to look after children. Like it just wasn't going to happen. So so he stopped work for 6 months and I had never been busier. And it worked really well and it was really nice, and we're very equal. So I think at the moment, so when I moved to Network Rail, there's a lot more travel. I think the children see him more than I do, which I'm really happy with, because actually it should be more equal. And in the job I'm doing now for GBR, it's more London based. So I'm there more. So it's kind of tipped the other way now. But actually, it's much more of a partnership, and I wouldn't be able to do it without him, which is amazing. But I think for me, it's be brave in what you're asking for and know your value. You have to believe how good you are.
Yeah.
And know that if someone sees that value in you, you can ask for hard things because you'll give it back and you're worth it. And I think that's really important. I think people forget how good they are sometimes.
Yeah, it's almost learning to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's a skill that you have to develop. Like not everyone is born with that kind of confidence in themselves. So I think it's learning to do that. Do you think you had any moments when you've had to, like, it's almost like a switch is flipped? It's like, no, I know I'm good enough for this, and I think I need to make it known to other people.
I definitely need support in that. Right. So this is where the informal mentors come back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Trish, help. Is this okay to ask for? So absolutely, this is when I reach out to those people and I'm like, and I sort of test it with them. I'm like, am I being ridiculous by asking this? Am I not? And there's people and friends that I've met through work, men and women, and I run it by them, and I'm like, it's a guy, Chris, I call and I'm like, Chris, is this a terrible idea? What do you think? How would you receive this? How would you want it to be worded?
Yeah.
And equally, they'll ask me the same thing. And I think that's a really nice dynamic when you've got people you can run hard things by, and sort of just test it out. And sometimes you do need that confidence boost, a little like cheering squad behind you to remind you.
Yeah.
Which is really lovely. And I think that's something I've definitely found in the industry, is that there are so many amazing people who do want to help and do want to help others and see others succeed. And I think that's really lovely.
Yeah. And you got to look out for those.
Yeah.
People and like grab onto them. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. One thing that I wanted to kind of circle back on is you talked about, so your line manager and kind of you're now in that position to foster a kind of a good working culture and you're kind of in control of those conversations a bit. What does kind of that look like to you at the minute? What kind of challenges do you have to face? Is there anything that you can share with us on that?
So I think that's a really good question. I think for me, it's always about treating other people how I would want to be treated. And understanding like the thought about why someone's asking something. I think I always kind of go into a situation thinking people aren't trying to be obstructive, people aren't trying to be difficult, people aren't trying to be angry. And if someone's angry about something, like it's what's the motivation behind that and what's someone's motivation to coming to work. And so when I was a duty manager, like managing train operators, and someone came in and said, I've totally forgotten, it's my mother-in-law's birthday tomorrow, can I leave early? It's kind of doing everything I can to make that happen, because I know if I was that person, I'm terrible at organisation, so I would know that I would need help, and actually I would remember the kindness and give it back tenfold. So it's sort of making that decision on the moment to be like, right, what's more important here? The risk of something happening here, which is quite small, or the risk of like the ability for someone to go and do something that was really important to them. And I try and sort of, if you extrapolate that up, it's the same conversation now. If someone says to me, this is really important to me, I'll try everything to make it happen. And I think that for me also, I want to know why something is important. So if I've asked something and someone says no, that's fine, but I really need it to be explained why. So if I'm saying no to someone, I go out of my way to explain why. And if I can say yes, I'll say yes. And sometimes it's I can't do this, but how about that? So for me, it's about displaying that with those conversations and then talking about it as much as I can. So with sort of the person's permission, it'd be like, right, can we talk about how we've worked through this, or share other people with what we've done here? And I will always try, and by doing that with my team, hopefully that will sort of share out. And I think it's also about, like, I've never said no to anyone going on secondment, because although secondments are sort of with manager's permission, I'd much rather have one of my team go off and learn something and do something else than stay in their job and be really miserable and cross with me for not approving it. Yeah. Because actually, someone else will get that sort of benefit by getting to their job, and I think everything is workoutable. Terrible word.
Brilliant. So now we're wanting to talk about advice pieces that you've had based on your career so far. You've talked about moving into different areas and looking out for things that you didn't know before. What advice would you pass on to the next generation?
So I got some amazing advice a few years ago when I was struggling to find out what my next role was. And someone said to me, write down 3 columns, what I love doing, what I really dislike doing, and what I'm sort of ambivalent about. And rather than looking for a specific job title or be like, I want this job, I want that job, they kind of said job titles change all the time. There's always organisational changes. So it's not helpful saying I want to be X. It's what do I love doing? And then find a role that fits that. So I really liked that different way of looking at sort of what my next challenge was. And I wrote down these sort of 3 lists, and it was really interesting. And then I also, throughout my career, I've always looked at job descriptions of jobs that I thought would be interesting. So I always looked at sort of the next promotional job advert as well, and looked at my gaps between what I had done in that job, and looked at my peers as well, and sort of said, right, if there's 10 at my level, for example, and there's 1 director, how am I different to all these other people? What experiences do they have that I don't have? What can I get that they don't have? So I always looked at things quite critically. And with the combination of sort of looking at job descriptions that were out there, my skills, and this sort of list of what I like doing, what I don't like doing, that's kind of how I identify what areas might be interesting to go into. And I think something else that's really critical in our industry is it's really easy to go after the fun sounding projects. So at Transport for London, everyone wanted to work on the Olympics. Everyone wanted to work on Crossrail. Everyone wants to work on the big name stuff. But actually, if you go in and it's a terrible job and it's really boring, you're not going to learn anything. And you might be able to say Crossrail on your CV, but if there's nothing to talk about or there's nothing to differentiate you, it's totally pointless. And actually, it could be really boring to go and work in X department. But if you are doing something really tangible, that's amazing. And I think it's objective setting is also really important. I really hate doing it. I'm not good with words. I'm dyslexic. I can't stand a blank piece of paper. But equally, I also get it's really important to be like, what have I achieved? What have I done? And actually AI now is great at helping me write objectives, like myself and my team. But I think I'm much more aware of what things I'm missing and like where my breadth is. And I think that the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know, which is always quite interesting. And actually sometimes I think now it's not necessarily about going to work in that area, but as you said earlier, is going to seek someone out who does work there and talking to them. And people are always really happy to talk. And I think that's really nice.
Yeah.
I think for me, I have very high expectations of myself. And sometimes I probably need to like just calm down a little bit. But I'm always on the move and I'm always looking for something. I'm not always looking for something. I'm always looking at how I can develop myself in my role. It's not like I get to a job and I'm always looking for the next thing. It's what do I need to know in this role, or how can I expand myself? Where do I need to go? But it's also totally okay if you don't want to do that. That if you want to really understand your specialism, that's totally okay as well. But then it's how can I be the best that I can be? And then it's about going to talk to people, bringing in different ideas, looking at different companies, the way they do things. And I think there's so many opportunities out there of just building knowledge. I think that's really important. I think something for me as well is that not every day is easy. Not every job will go the way you want it to. I've had 2 job applications. I've applied for 2 jobs that I had been doing on secondment and didn't get the role. My very bad claim to fame is that someone once created a job for me outside of the railway and I didn't get it. And I was like, oh, that's horrendous. And it was awful and it was crushing at the time. But I kind of said, like, I have my little pity party. I get really upset for a little bit. And then I'm like, right, that's not helping anyone. Move on. So I kind of always have to let myself be sad about that.
Yeah.
And be a bit cross about it and go and have a drink with one of my friends and be like, well, rubbish, they made a terrible decision. But then actually it's being negative and grumpy about it isn't going to help me. And so it's about, right, what do I do next? How do I pivot that next? And actually the 2 jobs I didn't get when I've been doing the secondment, I spoke to my boss at those times and I got different roles and I moved into a different secondment. It wasn't a promotional one, but it's a different area where I learned something that I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have known otherwise. So I think for me, it's about, I always work hard to try and find the value in something and sort of pivot it to what I need it to be. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think as well, probably people listen to this maybe juniors and like early careers, and it's almost like when you're looking for those opportunities, it's hard to know if you're going to enjoy it, if it's going to be something you want to progress. So it's interesting you're navigating setbacks, you're navigating like side steps all at the same time. It's never going to be the 5-year plan that you drew on a mood board, is it? It's evolving.
And I never had that 5-year plan. I never like when everyone said, "Oh, where do you want to be in 5-10 years?" I'm like, I have no idea. And I'm really happy with that. I'm very much into like flexibility and I don't like sort of a plan that I have to like rigidly stick to like that. And so I was always really happy with that. But I think for me, it's if you're trying to figure out, even when it's like looking for your next like grad placement or your first job, I really recommend the 3 columns. Like, what do I love doing? Does it align to my values? Does it align to what I want to get out of life? So I know I love being able to go and like play on the railway. And I genuinely say to people, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I play with trains. Because sometimes it really feels like that and I love it. And I really miss that in my current job. And I know that I really miss it, but I'm learning so many other things. So I'm kind of like counterbalancing that in my head. But equally, I'll go and work at ops locations sometimes just to make sure I'm like, this is still the railway.
Yeah.
So I think it's those 3 lists have been really helpful. And I wish I'd heard that earlier, actually, because it would have helped me just know that I was making the right choices.
Yeah.
I think it's just, it doesn't all have to be everything you love doing, but try and have more what you love and less of what you don't.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap up, what is next for you? So you're talking about your secondment. Is it a secondment?
There's on the secondment at the moment.
So when this kind of comes to an end, are you going to be going back to doing what you were doing before? Are you looking to change?
Well, it's such a good question. I'm honestly not sure yet. So I think so the work I've been doing on Great British Railways is my bit of it is coming to an end soon, and I haven't quite decided yet. I really miss the railway, and I want to go back to my operations director job. but at the same time, I'm speaking to other people about some different GBR roles. And I think it's because it's such an incredible opportunity to be in sort of the forming conversation of Great British Railways. I feel like it's almost too much of an opportunity to miss up because it's not going to happen again. So I think I'll probably look for something more in the sort of integration space and learn, and sort of, I really like being that operational voice in a world of non-operational people. Yeah, I think that could be more beneficial to me than going back to a role that I have done, and there's always things to learn, and I really love the railway, but I think I'll probably look for more GBR type roles, or a secondment extension. But if I do go back to ops director, I'll be very happy.
Yeah.
Because I love that job.
Yeah, go play with some trains.
Yeah, go play with some trains. And do integration in real time, because GWR are coming in next year, I think.
Yeah, amazing.
So yeah, it's exciting.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for kind of talking us through your career, giving us all the advice. It's been extremely valuable, and I've loved talking through it all with you.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been lovely talking to you.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you all for listening to the Next Gen Meets Sophie Bancroft. We hope you've enjoyed as much as we did. We'll be posting these on SYSTRAcast and where else you can get your podcast from.